All right, I think I got audio working. Everything's working good this time. How you doing, Steve?
Fantastic.
Good, glad to
It's
hear.
good to see you. I'm having a little bit of fear of missing out of Gen Con, but it's tempered by my fear of COVID more. So, uh,
I I got sick just if I had been at Gen Con, I would have been there sick. So um,
no, I'm
I
sorry.
I apologize right now if I got a random sneeze or cough during this stream. But let's introduce our guest. We have with us DC Bradshaw. Welcome.
Hi, good to be here. It is 4 o'clock in the afternoon for me here. So good morning to you and good afternoon to anyone else in the UK.
Well, we're still drinking our morning coffee here, so
Yeah,
I like the branded mug.
yep,
yeah,
product placement.
a lot of pride. We have is a merch store open yet?
No, not yet. And hell, I'd send you one, DC, but I don't want to pay for postage all the way to Scotland.
Yeah, the taxes alone would be awful.
But all right. So again, this is the first time we're having a guest, and we do appreciate DC for jumping on board with us because we want to talk to him about again creativity in Dungeons and Dragons and role playing games, and he is the author and creator of a little, well, I was going to say a little project, but it's a little but fierce, a fifth edition variant for players of all ages, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So it is fifth edition, but it has been streamlined and simplified for, I mean, I say children of all ages. Realistically, it's kids that are about kind of 6 and older. We do have, there were some play testers who were 5 years old, which was awesome. But absolutely, it is taking that 5e that most of us know and love, and really trying to streamline the rules, take out those bits that are maybe just there to counter rules lawyering, or those bits that are overly complicated, taking the language and making it more accessible. There was an awful lot of back and forth of, is this a word that 6-year-olds would know or not? And try and file off some of those rough edges and nasty tropes that have hung around for a while and maybe aren't that kid friendly. I think it succeeded.
It's fantastic. It's fantastic. You've done so many things to it, like boiling down the stats to just 4. Like, if I've understood correctly, and how they kind of like how it subsets into other little side stats.
Yeah, absolutely. So rather than the 6 skills that a lot of people know, it's 4 S's now. It's strength, speed, smarts, and smiles. The 4 stats. So yeah, it means intelligence and wisdom are just into smarts, and constitution has become more of a skill rather than a stat itself. And you're right, they then branch off into some skills, but it's far fewer than there are in main 5th edition. I can't remember how many there are in main 5th edition, which probably says there's too many to begin with. Now we've got fitness and toughness, hiding, stealing, finding, knowing, understanding, performing, and talking.
That's great.
Certainly a lot more accessible.
And then the character sheet is a work of art. It's fantastic.
Thank you so much for that. It was a lot of work, that one. It was, trying to make something that was user friendly to everyone, but in particular the front page. I tried to make sure that mainly pictorial. So for every ability, every skill, there's a great big picture that goes with it. I use some public domain RPG assets for that one, so that if you've got a kid who maybe is still struggling to read, they can see the big picture and the big number that goes with it, and then it's a lot more accessible. I mean, maybe they need a parent to help them with what equipment they've got, but actually if it's just right, smiles roll, and they can see the big picture, the happy grin, and the big number that goes next to it.
It's brilliant. It's brilliant. I've seen a lot of expansions or adaptations of 5e, but this was maybe the most novel and charming. It's just so inviting. So well done. Well done.
No, thank you so much.
Now, I'm complete honesty here. The reason I wanted to talk to DC was because I had to say, damn it, you stole my idea. Because I've got a 6-year-old daughter right now who's bugging me to play Dungeons and Dragons. Because obviously her dad does. And so I've been thinking of a way to do it. And I've started actually working on my own kid-friendly version. And looking at your version, I'm like, okay, as awesome as this is, I think I could still pull mine off. There's because there's also what's that other that DM newbie did, I think.
I can't remember the name of it. It's terrible. I should know. But I mean, I think um, it's good that there's various ways you can take this. You know, I think I mean, one, you know, monopolizing things is never a good thing. In general, what's quite an open and inviting space. You know, the indie RPG scene. You know, I think it's very rare you see anyone seeing other people as competitors. It's always right. Like, let's, you know, signal boost their stuff, because everyone is doing wonderful stuff in there. And just because I made a way to make it more kid friendly doesn't mean there's not, you know, a million other ways to do it. So
oh yeah, my way will be better.
Well, I'm daunted by the amount of work that went into it. Just in terms, it's 150 pages.
That sounds about right. I mean,
it's a solid everything you need to play. You know, you don't need other reference books. It's all self-contained.
Yeah, what I wanted to do, I mean, the big goal here is to produce something that kind of covers all three core books to some degree. I mean, obviously, I can't take everything that's in the three core books, or Wizards lawyers will be very angry with me. But it's based off the system reference document, which is largely the basic rules plus some other bells and whistles. So I am hoping that eventually, well, I say eventually, my goal is maybe next year that I can hopefully crowdfund, you know, a big actual hardback version that includes a lot more content that's in this one. But this one it's 4 classes. It's enough creatures that you could run a variety of different games. So you've got, you know, some that are like humans. You've got some undead in there, which are called the Lost. So it doesn't use the word dead to make it less scary. There's a variety of stuff in there. There's enough spells for the 2 spellcasting classes, so that's mages and druids. So you get a bit of variety in there. But yeah, it's one of those, when I realized I made those decisions, I then had to commit to making all those things, and spells and creatures take up an awful lot of the book. The actual core rules are surprisingly short.
And I also like that you don't have, the spells don't have levels. Grades.
Yeah, absolutely. We went to grades on that one. That was quite late in the day. That one. It was finding out. I mean, it was finding out a lot of what language to change and what to stick with. I didn't want to change any language just for the sake of changing language, because the more you do that, the less accessible it comes to the adults that are helping the kids to play the game.
Right.
So for a while, it was still, you know, character levels and spell levels, and then someone really late in the day pointed out, one of my playtesters, that's actually confusing. And of course it is. You know, the second you've got 2 different things called levels, you say, well, my, you know, 4th level mage can cast, you know, 5th level spells. It gets confusing. So it's like, well, we need to change it to something. And I was tempted for a second to go for almost an Elder Scrolls kind of novice level, apprentice level, you know, give them names, but it's like, right. No, numbers work, but let's go for grades. It means basically the same thing, but it's also, especially for the American audience, it's got that link to school grades. As well.
That's where my head went, and I thought super clear and charming, and yeah, really smart.
Thank you.
Yeah. Now you mentioned that you have druids and mages. Distinctive decision not to have clerics, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It was from the start of it. I knew it was basically going to be fighter, wizard, thief. Those seemed like no-brainers to me, though. I again, quite late in the day, changed wizard to mage, and that was a decision from some playtesting from a friend of mine with 2 kids who were playing it, who didn't like the fact that wizard implied your Gandalf type, you know, old man with a beard, and actually they wanted like a word that worked for them as well. Yeah, pretty much. It works, but we still go with mage because it's a bit more inclusive. But you're right, you know, the obvious thing to go with was a cleric, and I had this notes file on my Mac, which was all the ideas that were bouncing around my head. And for a while I had cleric, let's maybe call it priest. And I started looking at the mechanics. And I had some ideas of how I would do it. And I think when I do the big book, I will do it. But I realized then that it opens the door to something that can make people uncomfortable about role-playing games. I mean, I didn't go through the satanic panic thing. I was born in 85, so I just missed that. But there's still this feel that, you know, anything about it that's to do with religion and demons and all that kind of thing, that is controversial. You know, you're getting a lot of people who go, ah, no, it's a big scary thing, and you've got a good guy who can cast spells. But other people will go, no, no. The second you've got a character who gets their power from a god with a lowercase g, that then opens a huge door to maybe conversations they don't want to have with their kids. So I thought that makes it tricky. And also the fact that the mechanics of the cleric class there's some fiddly stuff in there with domain spells and, you know, all those sorts of mechanics where actually the idea of, oh, you play a servant of nature, you know, everyone likes animals and you can turn into an animal. That's a lot more appealing. You know, actually to the average person, but, you know, it's certainly to kids, the idea, oh, I can play someone who can turn into an owl or a rat or a fox or something. That's great. And it feels more childish.
Yeah,
in a fun way.
Every 5 or 6 year old wants to be a veterinarian when they grow up.
Absolutely.
So that's perfect. And again, the whole theological keeping, you know, that out of a game aimed towards younger audience, I think is a smart move. Also, some other things you toyed with is the concept of death.
Yeah, that was one. I didn't want to make it scary, and there's a lot of places in there where you can make little changes to the rules to make it less scary. Like I said, you know, I don't use the word undead in any way. I use the lost, which is a kind of a vague term, but it covers the bases. When you say zombies and skeletons, we know what we're talking about, but it involves the word death. I have the condition of someone being badly hurt rather than being dead. So you fail 3 recovery rolls and you are badly hurt. That puts you out of the game for a while, but it never says that you're dead. It says that, you know, you're really badly hurt. You know, it'll take someone, you know, with good skill in magic and healing to bring you back. But the rules subtly suggest that maybe you want to have a chat with the player and talk about maybe them having a new character, a new hero they could play for a bit. But it definitely steers away from this means someone is dead. It's you either knocked out or you're badly hurt. And I've got the same in a few different places in there. There's a section there, the storytellers section on there, which moving away from DM, it's storytellers. And it talks about the fact that these are things you want to consider, you know, even if you're not using death as a concept, you know, avoid situations where people might seem like they are dead or animals might seem like they are dead. I've got one long blurb in there which ends with a very specific statement of dead cats are not fun, because, you know, if you've got a hero who loves their pet cat as their, you know, whether it's their familiar or whether it's just a cat they've got as their character quirk or something like that, don't put them in a situation where they can die. You know, that's not fun for anyone. So absolutely, it's trying to steer away from those scarier concepts. You can introduce them if you like, and there are suggestions for how you could, but it's not in there as the rules is written.
Yeah, the number one rule in Hollywood is don't kill the dog.
Absolutely.
Except for when it comes to John Wick, and that is the one
driving force.
Why I have never seen that movie. I heard what happens at the beginning of that movie, and I'm like, I'm out. Spoiler
That's
alert.
fair. That's fair.
But yeah, because, you know, and I've got plenty of notes on my kid version of D&D 5e, and since it's 5e, I'm calling it 5 easy peasy dragon squeezy.
I love that. I love that. It is amazing how long I spent rattling around trying to come up with the name. It was one of those that part of me was tempted to go with thing and thing.
Yeah.
I thought, yeah, because it's recognizable, but it also, I couldn't find 2 things that worked. Or there had been other products out there, quite famous products, that kind of fell into that category. And it was like, I don't want to do that.
Right.
But, and I stole from the best. I stole from the Bard himself. I'm an ex-teacher who did teach a bit of Shakespeare. So the second I thought of, you know, Little But Fierce from stealing from that Shakespeare quotation, I thought, yeah, that works. That encapsulates everything I want. You know, don't take them for granted. It's not babyish. You know, they can still be heroes. Little But Fierce. I like it.
Well,
yeah, it's great.
Complete disclosure, I wanted to do a play on 5e, so that's where I came up with the 5 easy peasy.
Yeah.
And the basic of the game will be like, you know, something that's easy to do. It has a DC challenge of 5, you know, medium 10, you know, hard 15, really hard 20.
No, I like that.
Yeah, I want to keep this. I want to keep the 20-sided dice as the main aspect of the game. 5th edition, but I also want to utilize all the other dice because kids love playing with those different shapes.
Mm-hmm.
I was in the shower this morning and I came over with Dragon Squeezy.
It's great, and there's a mental image that goes with it, I think.
So yeah, and the concept of death in what I'm working on is I'm just calling it banished.
Yeah, that works. I like that.
The monster gets banished. How that happens with player characters, I don't know yet. But again, it's fun. One of the wonderful things about the SRD, the system reference document, and D&D 5th edition more than any other edition, as well as the independent games thing, is the sandbox we all get to play in and change it and make it fit our needs or the desires that we want to put out there. And again, what you've taken with this is awesome, and I'm so looking forward to. I mean, yeah, I hope there's a Kickstarter for a hardback version later. I want there's tons of room for bestiaries, or creature codexes, or monster manuals, or whatever you want to call them. And then, have you thought about writing adventures?
Absolutely. It's one of the things. Immediately, I had some people going, "Are there adventures for it?" And the answer was, "Not yet. I'm only one person." But absolutely, that's definitely in the pipeline. I want to produce some stuff myself, but also I want to reach out to other members of the tabletop RPG kids movement. There's a lot of really awesome people out there, many of whom were play testers. Hatchling Games were great. Steph Campbell, who runs Tabletop RPG Kids, all these people who have been doing excellent work in the area and have been very, very supportive. Again, not actually like competitors or anything, but incredibly supportive. And like I said, most of them were play testers. I want to reach out to some of them, say, can we have a compendium with maybe 6 different adventures from 6 different authors, which would be absolutely wonderful. It's not too hard to convert 5th edition, an existing 5th edition adventure to Little But Fierce. The worst thing is creatures, where I've actually put together an Excel tool to convert them automatically for you, because it was the thing that annoyed me the most. So I was making it just to check I was doing it correctly. But it's not too bad to change over, but definitely something in the pipeline.
Yeah, talking about creature design in 5th edition, or variations of 5th edition. Steve had mentioned that I'm a professional dungeon master. That's I don't know. I mean, I've gotten a paycheck for it, but that's because I DM Catacombs and Comedians, where I take
yes, of course,
the stand-up comics, we get on stage and we play Dungeons and Dragons. So I've been coming up with my own creatures for that game. The Foul Boar is my favorite, because I just wanted, everybody loves the owl bear, but I wanted to come up with something that was more crazy, more weird, more obnoxious, and more funny. So how did I design that creature? And creature design was always a pain in the ass for me. But then I just said, lighten up, Dan, and just reskin.
It is one of those things that no one can see behind the curtain unless they have a copy of the book. So they don't know what stats it may have in comparison to something. And actually, it's even easier when you're using a system that's not quite true 5th edition, in that, if you say, oh, I've got the standard, I don't know, skeleton stats, and I've changed it to be something else, they might very quickly realize. But given the fact that everything is slightly converted anyway, the stats aren't quite the same, abilities maybe aren't quite the same, it adds another layer of obfuscation for the fact that you've just taken something else and changed it.
Yeah, it's metric. It's metric. I don't understand what's happening. Yeah.
That was actually an interesting thing. I went back and forth on that one, which was, do I use feet or not? I mean, obviously 5th edition uses feet. I don't. I can judge some sort of imperial measurements, but I was never taught it at school. But I thought, if I go for metric, some people are immediately going to hate it. So I went for units. And there's a little blurb in there that says, a unit is equivalent to, this many meters, this many feet, if you want to give them a real life reference. But the fact is, how often are you actually visualizing, oh, that's 72 feet, it's like, no, it's like yay far away. He's in the distance. He's quite far away, or pretty close, so units works fine. And it works well if you're working with an actual table or hexes or something.
Yeah. Now, did you picture this more as a theater of the mind type game, or as miniatures on the table?
I left it open. because actually I think it depends on who you're playing with. You know, I originally got into this. The first anything like this I played was Hero Quest from Games Workshop, which then there was a little bit of advanced Hero Quest, but then Warhammer Quest was the more expanded version, and then eventually into role-playing games with Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, the Star Wars game at the time, and a little bit of Vampire and stuff like that, which led more into Theatre of the Mind. The second we moved away from Warhammer Quest, we didn't really use miniatures. But I think it's both have their advantages. I think some people like to be able to see everything on the table, and especially when we've got, you know, how available having custom minis is, you know. So actually, you know, your kid can design something, and then, you know, a few quid or a few dollars later, you can have a custom mini, maybe even pre-painted, sent to you of it. Right. You know, that's wonderful to have stuff on the table and visualize it. But equally, you know, kids love to imagine. Everyone loves to imagine. Sometimes it's better to say, well, actually, especially if you've got a small group, if you were like, you know, running it for 2 kids, you know, actually maybe, you know, nailing it down to miniatures is less fun than them imagining the giant dragon or imagining the giant dungeon. So it can work either way. And I've tried to leave it open, so, you know, you can work whichever way you want to go with it.
Do you think of A Little Bit Fierce as a sort of training wheels version of D&D, or do you think of it really as kind of, is there a way of thinking about it one way or the other? Like,
yeah, yes and no, which I know is an incredibly unhelpful answer.
No, that's great.
Absolutely, in that I wanted it to be something. I mean, I originally built it. The original idea came from it because I was a teacher, so I've been in education for a while. I'm still in education, but not teaching. I've got a 2-year-old now, and I want to introduce her to the hobby at some point. And I thought, well, how would I do that? I have run games for my niece and nephew before, but I was immediately confronted with, this is very complicated. And they got it, but it was complicated. So I thought, well, actually, I want to make something so when I first introduce it to my daughter, to something a little bit easier to play with. And maybe she then goes on to 5th edition or other role-playing games later on, or maybe this is enough. Maybe this is that Hero Quest, Warhammer Quest environment that actually doesn't need to go more complicated than that. It's a fun experience, but, you know, if she's not as nerdy as I am, so be it. And maybe this is as far as it goes. Okay. But actually, I've had a playtest who says actually their family prefer it to 5th edition, which, my God, that is incredible feedback. That's but there's some things about it that they prefer in how it works, and, you know, taking out all that, again, needlessly complicated rules, have something that's a bit freer.
I did it as a single. I'm sorry.
If my daughter is not as nerdy as I am, I'm asking for DNA testing.
But I like the idea that it's just a single book as well. I mean, that's got to be liberating for people. It's like, because it feels like now with 5e, like if you don't have 8 books, you can't really even begin. You know, even the starter set feels like, okay, this has got a lot of pieces rattling inside it.
Absolutely, and I want to try and keep to that. Yeah, this is the starter edition that's out with, you know, 4 classes and some stuff. I've got 2 expansions in the works right now that each add a class and another couple of extra features. When I get to the hardback, I'm still hoping that's going to be a single book, because I think it is more accessible, that someone could read the whole thing cover to cover, or read the first 2 sections and not the storyteller's bit. I think it is more accessible. I might make an exception depending how I go with this theology issue. I might have a little side book, which is essentially the good and evil book, that's got clerics and warlocks and angels and demons and stuff that maybe we don't want in the core rule book for a very specific reason. But I would like to keep it to a single book for exactly that reason.
Lovely.
Do you have in mind a set realm that this would take place in? Maybe like, do you have a Forgotten Realms for Little But Fierce and you're rattling somewhere in your head?
Not yet. I mean, I've run 2 campaigns that were homebrew, where I had my own worlds for them. And I honestly, I don't think I would use either of them for it, just because, you know, I think I built them with the players in mind. I think maybe I will at some point. I think I'm very inspired by the work the Humblewood team have done. Humblewood, sure. If you've not seen it, is adorable. The anthropomorphic creatures. It taps into that. You probably don't know the reference here, but in the UK we had a cartoon series based on a series of books called Animals of Farthing Wood, that was out when I was a kid. And again, that was actual animals, but they all had voices, they all talked. But it tapped into that kind of feel, the Disney Robin Hood feel. There's something nice in that space there. So I think at some point I probably will come up with a world that can be used, but I'm resistant to the idea of this is the only world. Forgotten Realms is good, but there's almost this thing of the second you go from Forgotten Realms, you've got to tie into everything else, or you've got to make sure it kind of fits with the canon. Right. So maybe I'll put something in there. Here is our preset world you could use for some things, but I think when I go for adventures, however I write them, I'll try and keep it as free and easy and could be dropped into any fantasy world.
That's lovely. Well, you say your background was education. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I was a teacher for 10 years. I'm a contradiction in terms. I was a maths and computing teacher who also taught a little bit of drama and a bit of Shakespeare. I know it's completely opposite ends of the spectrum. I've been called a contradiction many times. But I love the creative side of things. Part of my brain does the analytical thing very well, which is great if you're building your own system. If you need to build a spreadsheet to convert stats and to do all of that and do analysis on what happens if I go from D20s to D10s, how does the average rolls change? That's great for that, but the creative side is huge as well. So writing, drawing, acting, absolutely. I try and do as much of it as I can.
Drawing. Do you have any of your own art in the in any of your books?
I don't know. It's something I've not done for a little while. I used to do it just as a hobby. I've got a sketchbook somewhere, mainly of copying sounds awful, but but inspired by movie posters and stuff like that. So there's a lot of drawings of the Joker and characters like that, and stills from other films. I've not done any original art for a very, very long time, and I'm kind of nervous too, because in this scene I know so many wonderful artists. It's like I will be put to shame if I ever share anything I do with them.
Yeah, so you can handle the fluff and crunch quite well, it sounds like. I'm much more of a fluff guy, where I just like creating the world. I like writing up the histories, the backgrounds, the reasons why this magic item might be here, or the funny thing this magic item. And then when it comes to, like I discussed earlier, with coming up with these monsters, of deciding the crunch of what the CR level would be if it has this, and decide hit points and all blah 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 blah. Yeah. So it's great that you're able to attack the RPG creation from both angles.
Yeah, I am my own worst enemy in that sense, because then it feels like I want to try and do a bit of everything, and that means everything moves slower. Logically I should go, right, I'm going to try and bring in someone else to do that bit, or I'm going to ask someone to do that. Maybe I'll collaborate with a team. But because I kind of feel I can do most of it except the art side, it means I try and micromanage all of it myself, which means it takes 6 months to make something like Little But Fierce.
Well, I just admit that I'm a control freak, and that's why I don't bring anybody else on board.
That's fair.
So speaking of the art and with RPGs, Steve and I have kind of been talking about this AI art creation that's been coming on, and it's taken the RPG creation scene by storm. It seems like a lot of a lot of publishers are already starting to use this, and I've played around with Midjourney. I know there are others out there. I don't know what you guys may have explored.
Yeah, the second I saw, obviously people share on social media is it DALL-E ones? I think that's rebranded as something else now, which are kind of sort of fun, but they're like, you couldn't use this for anything. It just kind of visualizes the weird two things you mash together on the keyboard. But the second someone mentioned Midjourney, and I had to go on Discord, it's incredibly impressive. I said I have a computer science background, and I have no idea how they got the AI model to do what it does, because it's incredible. It is absolutely incredible, but the ramifications of it are huge. There's no getting around that.
Yeah, there's a great Vox video breaking down the process. It doesn't go into like the specifics of DALL-E versus Midjourney and how their metrics are discerning between a banana and a Ford Focus. It's not or Frazetta versus Sendak. So I don't know how they're doing it, but it's stunning. There's a couple of Kickstarters, just part of Zine Quest, which is going on this month on Kickstarter. 3 of them obviously are using, at least 3 of them are using Midjourney artwork. And and a shout out to Scourge of Northland. Is that what it's called? That's it's a Zine Quest one. It's kicking butt right now. It's at 26,000 or
Oh,
so.
wow.
And the person says, yeah, and I'm using Mid-Journey artwork. I just like as an artist who spent his life learning how to draw, I just appreciate anybody saying, listen, okay, I use this as a starting point and then I touched it up. It's like, because it does feel like it's almost in the realm of photography, in that it's more like, this is what, because it's a prompting engine, the thing feels, everything that it creates feels more like a sunset than a Monet to me. It feels like there's less human involvement in its creation in some way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the bits I've played around with, sometimes it goes completely the wrong direction. And it's
Sure.
for those who haven't used it, the fact you can type something in or you can retype something in, but you can then ask for variations on a theme. Essentially, it presents you with 4, and then you can say, give me more like that or more like that. And when you get something you're generally happy with, you can then say, yo, up-res it, up-res it, up-res it.
Right.
I played around with it with some various different kind of prompts, and there's definitely ones where if you were to use it, you would have to touch it up. You have to go, whoa, that corner there, something weird has happened there.
And it's not great with symmetry. You'll see like a face, and it's like it has like eyeliner and big eyelashes on this side, but not on that side. There's a drooping nostril. It's very It's still a little liquid, but
yeah, I remember for those. I'm a great fan of Corridor Digital and some of the stuff they do. I don't know if people are aware of them, but they're great in unwrapping visual effects for movies and TV shows and stuff like that. And they've done a lot of experimentation with deepfakes, which obviously is a similar sort of AI related thing. And they talk about the fact that that's how you tell, if something is a deepfake, because you look for those things that should be symmetrical but aren't. Look at the eyes,
right.
Are there, you can see the reflection of my ring light in both my eyes, but if you could see 2 lights in one eye and one in the other, that suggests that actually something's been doctored here, or something is AI and it's not sophisticated to realize enough that actually that thing should be identical in both. And I think the same's here, that it doesn't quite realize something should be symmetrical, or other things it's okay to be asymmetrical.
Right. But I like that. I do love that it's empowering people to create very striking images, and as much as artists might bristle at computer generated artwork, and I understand the threat to the kind of to the younger creators who are just trying to get their careers off the ground. They're trying to scrape together a little bit of income, and here comes this AI that's just going to instantly empower anyone to enter a prompt and produce something steps above where their skills are at. And but it's making some of these Kickstarters look like $1 million without a budget. Mid-Journey wants $10 a month, and you can create work that looks great.
But
yeah, I think.
But I played around with it with some specific ideas in mind, and I've yet to reach the exact. I'm not even going to say the exact thing, but something close to what I want to use. So there's a definite learning curve, because I understand what you're saying, Steve. Is I can't afford to pay artists, so I'll just do this myself with this AI thing. But the time, I'm gonna have. I don't know what I will accomplish quicker: learning how to do art like you, Steve, or learning how to manipulate the AI to something I like.
It's definitely, there's a lot to it. Like I said, I haven't signed up for it yet. I probably will, just because I find I think even if I never use it in a piece of material, I think it is interesting for visualizing concepts, or at least spiking ideas going in interesting directions of,
Sure.
I didn't think of that. That sparks a story idea or a plot point or something like that.
Yeah.
But with the free trial, you get something like 25. And I think I used most of those 25 trying to come up with one thing.
Sure.
And it was exactly that. It's like, I'm pretty sure I'm writing exactly the thing I want, exactly how you would describe it. It would be the alt text for the image, and yet it's not quite giving me the thing I want. I currently have, it's a little bit fierce expansion where I wanted, at this stage, just placeholder art, essentially as a background for the main pages. So it's not a front cover, it's not, a piece of character art. It's just literally, it's something that's slightly out of focus behind the text itself, of a dungeon scene. I wanted something reminiscent of, these are the walls of a dungeon, made of grey stone. And just getting that, a dungeon corridor made of grey stone. No, I don't want the doors to be made of stone. That looks silly. I can put in wood. Oh no, now the walls are a weird combination of grey and wood. No, that's weird. You're right. There is definitely a knack for figuring out how to describe the thing you want.
It's like
and it's
asking a
not
genie
easy.
for something, because it's like asking a genie where it's like, oh, you're going to give you, oh, I'll give you what you asked for, but not
Yeah,
how you
it's
wanted
the
it.
monkey's paw thing. You
Uh-huh.
wouldn't want to ask for one thing and then send it to print straight away.
That's what
God
they got to
knows what
call
you'd
it.
end up with.
Monkeyspaw.com. Just
And
go in there.
and I believe there will definitely be people who, have gigs on Fiverr who are, mid-journey experts. And
Right.
you say this is what I want, and they'll take your prompt and they'll figure it out exactly the way to put it in.
There's a website that actually will help you craft your mid-journey prompt.
Oh, I have to check that out.
Interesting.
So it's actually going to be like, okay, let me translate your wish into Mid-Journey's language. It's clearly a site with a short shelf life, because as soon as Mid-Journey gets smarter, it'll cut out that intermediary step. But again, the Kickstarters that have done it, they are doing great, and it's very moody, very evocative images. Even if you look at them closely and you're like, okay, that person's missing part of a hand, or their face is it's great for horror too. But
that's what I was thinking. Post-apocalyptic themes.
I've seen a lot of stuff that could definitely be Fallout or something like that. I ran a couple of the early tests I ran with it. I did another product a while back, which is kind of almost the exact opposite to Little But Fierce. So this thing called Hard-Boiled Adventures, which is essentially what would take the D&D fantasy setting and time jump it into like a 1940s America film noir. So you've still got magic and demons and stuff like that, but it's in kind of 1940s New York or something like that. So immediately I thought, well, this is going to be great. If I say give me a demon in the streets of New York, and that is exactly what it gave me. And you can't really pick out the features. It's this weird kind of black shadowy creature. You can see the limbs and proportions aren't quite right. But the second I said 1940s New York, clearly the source for it, what it trained on for that piece of information, was actual photographs. And then you look at it and go, that is creepy. That is really unnerving, and the fact it's got that H.R. Giger first Alien film to it of actually what I don't see is scarier. It's the shadow creature that you wake up in the middle of the night when you're not quite awake thing. And it's like, that's amazing as a prompt. I don't know if I'd ever use it in anything, but it definitely sends the brain going in certain directions.
That's great.
Yeah, that's another thing I want to talk to you about, DC. Your whole hard-boiled fantasy. Bastard, you apparently are swiping my ideas or something. Because I'm currently...
To be fair, he is 5 hours ahead of you, Dan.
That is the difference.
Because I've actually gone as far as getting the domain name Noirmancer.
Oh, that's good.
That's do fantasy noir type of thing. So that's another thing I'm working on.
Now, it's been done before.
Yeah,
it has been done before. But it is one of those ideas that's been rattling around in my brain for a long time, and I've always thought, is this a comic? Is this a book? I'd like to write a pulp novel at some point. That would be great. But there's always been I've always liked the idea. People always go way too far with the genre jump. Take the Games Workshop example. You had Warhammer, you had Warhammer 40,000. Yeah, right. Take it from fantasy to space. And then you've got spaceships and all of that. And you can see the similarities. You've got orcs in both. That's fine. And other people do the same thing. They go, well, let's take it all the way to sci-fi, or maybe they go to modern day with your... there's a lot of... I'm forgetting it right now. What's the series of films? Vampires versus werewolves. There's a load of them. Not Twilight, clearly. But it's going to annoy me.
Oh, heavens.
Yeah, my brain's just gone. But there's loads of people who take that, let's go for modern day or something, approaching modern day. But I thought, actually, going not quite to modern day is more evocative in my mind. It was one of the things I actually quite liked in the Fantastic Beasts films, was where you saw what a magical speakeasy would look like. And the second I saw that, I thought, that's brilliant. Ignore all the rest of it. Magical speakeasy. That's what I want. I want a casino with a lounge singer, but it's all, D&D races. That's great to me. Maybe there's still some, old school people who use swords, but most it'd be kind of guns and magic. How those two intermix is very interesting. Spells that are related to technology. But it was very much a basic idea of, give me like a Furbolg lounge singer or something like that. I did write a one shot that went with the book itself, and just for the pun alone. And I love dropping puns into content. It is just great. I had a crooner whose band were called the Lounge Lizards, and they were all Dragonborn and kobolds and
Brilliant.
Yuan-Ti, just for the pun alone.
Yeah,
that's brilliant.
You got to do it. You got to do it.
Yeah, Matt Forbeck did Shotguns and Sorcery.
Yeah, I saw that. I tried deliberately not to look at it. I saw that pop up and thought, I like that. I'm not going to read any more about it because I was still writing one of the books at the time. It's like, I don't want to accidentally steal ideas.
Right.
But it's such a rich area.
But yeah, so we're actually going to be talking to Matt in a couple weeks because he just ran a successful Kickstarter for the 5th edition version, and he did. I think the original version was Cipher. I'm not positive, but so that's a fun genre that again like little kid versions of Dungeons and Dragons. The pulp 40s Dungeons and Dragons is rich to pick from as well.
Was there a Fred Ward film? It's like I've seen remember being thought of as cheat. Cast a Deadly Spell.
Yeah.
Have you ever see that?
Yeah.
I haven't. I now must. Yeah, I'm going to be Googling that the second one.
It was like an HBO made for TV, cheesy, but charming as hell. Charming
what
as
they call straight to video.
Yeah.
Or now straight to streaming nowadays.
Like Cast a Deadly Spell, it was quite charming.
Yeah, and then there have been other more modern takes on that, like that Will Smith where he's a cop working with an orc.
Right?
Yeah, Brighton had fairies floating around, and what was that Pixar movie that just where they have their dad comes back?
Onward.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah,
I can remember those. I'm going to be vexed over that werewolf versus thing because I feel like we should just shred our nerd cards. Because
I'm going to try and Google it because it's going to annoy me. Is it Underworld? Is it Underworld?
That sounds right.
Yeah, Underworld. I was going to say Underground, but
close, but no cigar. Yeah.
Actually, with werewolves, it should have been called Underwear.
I think it'd be a very different film.
Maybe there go our subscribers.
But actually, on the Hardboiled Adventure thing, and it links full circle on this one back to the art again. That was an interesting one for me because I'd written the book, the main book of it, and I didn't want to release it without artwork. So I thought, actually, I put an awful lot of time into this. I want to put good artwork in it, but I didn't have the money to commission someone to do it. Even friends of mine, I would feel very bad asking them to try and produce artwork for that kind of price. So I thought, what else can I do here? And then the idea fell into my lap of, well, actually, this is 1940s stuff. Actually, so much public domain artwork is out there, from all of the classic pulp stuff, that you've got to be very careful. You've got to check, okay, when did this person die? What is this stuff public domain or not? Because I think a lot of people assume a lot of anything of that style is public domain, and actually it's not.
Right.
But that was what I went to for it. I thought, well, actually, there's so much public domain pulp artwork out there. I can just now start, photoshopping bits of this. I can take, a classic pulp piece of artwork and turn that guy into an orc. Well, I've got to change the hue of their skin. I need to adjust some of their facial features to make them more orcish. If I want to turn someone to a tiefling, maybe I've got to turn their skin red and give them horns and stuff. But that's what I did for the artwork for it. The front covers of the two books are two big pieces. And then all the others, I did them as kind of mock Polaroids. So I had this kind of Polaroid frame, and then I could then do a very small piece of pulp art and subtly edit bits of it to make it look like a fantasy race. Some are easier than others. And that gave me exactly what I wanted. It gave me the aesthetic, it gave me the feel of it. But again, it was a way to do art on the cheap. And there's a lot of other ways, I've got other pieces where I just need little bits of art, and you go to, really old paintings and go, well, actually, I just want, a skull in front of some candles on a desk. God knows how many artists have drawn something like that, from the, 1800s or well before it. That's all public domain. Get that, crop that, tidy it up a bit. It's a way of doing very nice artwork without, infringing on people's copyrights or, trying to do stuff and not pay people.
I was surprised at seeing how in Adobe stock system. So I guess it's $20 a month. Is that what it is? Like all you can eat, whatever Adobe stock images. It has there's quite a few fantasy paintings and like modern fantasy paintings that clearly are digital. They don't look like they don't look like Frazetta. They look a lot more like 5e and 4e in terms of how they
Yeah.
were constructed. So I mean, it's neat that people are able to leverage all this inexpensive artwork.
Yeah, and I think it's because there's a lot of mediums, and you've got to know where to look for them. There's things you can do for that are clearly public domain, like I said, old paintings and old pulp artwork and stuff like that. And then you get this stuff the DM's Guild put on there, which is from old editions. You've maybe got to think how you use it and remove a background or something to make it work, because maybe it's very pixelated or something. But then you get people who clearly just do this. I mean, I would assume people have sold stuff to Adobe stock, knowing the fact where maybe they get some money for it. I don't know what the deals would be. You get to call out an artist I've used before who I've never met, but there's a guy called Dean Spencer on Drive-Thru RPG, produces absolutely stellar artwork that you can buy a license for a very reasonable price. $5 for this or $10 for that, and it gives you exactly what you need, providing not everyone has used the same piece of artwork before you.
Right.
But if you just want, well, actually, I need something that fills this half of a page because there's a gap in there, you can get fantastic artwork, and clearly he must do very well.
That's great.
Yeah, there have been plenty of artist friends. I mean, not Steve, he doesn't need it, but where I was just said, just draw stock fantasy art and throw it up on Drive-Thru, and you'll do all right for, it's something to do between cons or, comic book gigs. But yeah, I don't know.
I think a lot of artists of this, I'm certainly not a lot of cartoonists know about it as a source of, income, or as a little bit of pizza money.
Yeah, a little bit of scratch.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I think I'm running low on coffee. I think we're about anything else we need to discuss before we sign off for the day, other than plugging our Kickstarter, Steve?
Well, no, I would just love to know DC's various links and social media.
Yeah.
I mean,
absolutely.
How do we get notified when the Little Bit Fierce Kickstarter begins? Because that's, to me, that's the most important part.
Okay, so the main social media I use is Twitter. That's my go-to, where I am at Curious Penguin, one word. Some reason I'll need to think about why I chose that so many years ago, but that's what it is. It's Curious Penguin, and inevitably, when the Kickstarter is announced on the loading page for it, I will spam the living hell out of it. Sorry to everyone who follows me when that happens. But dcbradshaw.com is my website that links to all my tabletop RPG stuff. It also links to any education resources I've got on there, because I do still have a lot of stuff that I published from resources I made back when I was a teacher. So if you are a teacher, please have a look at some of my education stuff that's on there. I actually have a link to my voice acting reel. I don't do a huge amount with it, but again, all aspects of creativity. So please check out my website and see if there's some good stuff that you'd like to enjoy. I do have Facebook and Instagram and stuff like that, but I'm not going to spam you with links from them. There are links from my website, but Twitter's definitely the go-to on that one.
That's great.
So, Steve, when is your Kickstarter kicking off? Your Zine Quest Kickstarter?
I have because of Zine Quest, I was inspired to put together a little, and that's one of the reasons why I look at your work, Dave, and go and just am blown away. Just the sheer amount of craft and mathematics involved, not just the artistry of it, because there's a ton of that in there too, but the creativity and just making sure all the capitalization is consistent across 150 pages.
It's a killer. There's no getting around that.
So I'm doing a tiny little zine, and it'll launch on the 17th, and it'll be a tiny campaign. We've talked about it before. Again, mostly inspired by Zine Quest. It's my first time. I've done minis. I've sculpted miniatures for the D&D side of things, but this is my first bit of content, first bit of source material. So hopefully I don't screw it up. And it's called It's called Intoximancy. It's for 5e. It's very low hanging fruit. It's something I can write pretty easily. And it'll be very silly, and it'll launch on the 17th.
All right, well, I'll be the first backer. And I've currently got one going on just because of Zine Quest. I'm taking some of the monsters from the Catacombs and Comedians, put them in a little mini monster manual called the Oddity Off Print Volume 1. Hopefully there'll be a Volume 2. And I'm, learning some things with this Kickstarter, with this Zine Quest. I was going to try to do it real easy and low key, like Steve and I discussed, but Now I'm thinking maybe I need a stretch goal to get some excitement going. Maybe I need, something like that, because I definitely hit a wall. And like I said, I'm not, this Kickstarter is not going to pay the rent, so I'm not worried about it. It's just something to share more Catacombs and Comedian stuff with. But yeah, it's currently out there. It's called The Oddity Off-Print number 1, or NO1. And if you're interested at all in little weird creatures like dire trash pandas and foul boars and homicidal hobos, this is the book for you to check out. And
all I'll say on that one is, if you're interested in a stretch goal, we should definitely talk about converting some of those creatures over to Little But Fierce if you want to have a little add-on for the combine the two.
Yeah,
those sound great. Dire Trash Panda sounds amazing.
we will talk about that. I would love to play in your sandbox with a Dire Trash Panda.
That's awesome.
Also got the hot chicken, and homicidal hobo might not be.
Maybe not that one.
Yeah.
Maybe not that
one. And actually, I am thinking of a stretch goal. You'll hear it here first. Adding a Dragonado. A dragon whose breath weapon is a tornado.
That's so. Would that be so? You'll just, whatever the goal is, you're gonna just. There's a whole conversation about that. I just want to talk shop about how to construct a Kickstarter at some point or another. I don't want to, abuse Dave's time, but really, I do think that's a subject for a whole episode, Dan, is just trying to figure out what these numbers are. Because there's a wonderful spreadsheet that is available on Twitter that someone is taking the Zine Quest, all these 97 projects, and has broken them down by number of backers, what the goal is, what the what the average price of what the price is for the basic digital product, what the price is for the basic physical product. It's incredible. A little resource. How much of it is for 5e? How much of it is for like old school essentials or dungeon crawl classics? Really breaking it down by what the system is, and fascinating information. I'm not sure how useful, but informative.
Yeah,
I don't know how applicable it is, but
I think definitely useful. It's definitely one of those that's one of the things that's kind of scary about the whole idea of kickstarting something, is you've got to not only make sure, am I going to turn a profit, or at the very least not lose money, but then there's all these other considerations. I mean, even just self-publishing something one time, you've got to think, well, actually, what's the best price for this? Do you do it by pages? Do you do it by artwork? Do you do it by, what do similar things do? There is definitely a science and a mathematics to it. Right. So absolutely, that's, I think, a very worthwhile conversation.
How much was all that time to get it to this point worth? How much is done before the project begins? How much of it is like, do you want to get, like, some people now are just kickstarting it, like, okay, if I get this money, then I'll spend the next year making the thing. And that I could never do that. I could never do that. I have to have the thing done, or mostly done, before.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, while we have our Kickstarters going, we will definitely explore those.
All right.
Concepts more. We'll talk Kickstarter next Sunday.
All right.
For sure. But again,
if I can.
Yeah.
So if I can chuck one extra plug on that one, and in that same wheelhouse, for those in the UK, or specifically those north of the Wall, I'm appearing at Tabletop Scotland convention on the 27th of this month, where I'm actually appearing on a panel with 3 other creators talking about self-publishing tabletop role-playing. So undoubtedly, Kickstarting will come into that discussion, and I believe it's being recorded, so I will link to it afterwards. But if you're in Scotland, please come and see me. It'd be great.
That's wonderful.
Well, I'll book my flight today.
And I'd love to talk to you again. There's so much I'd love to talk about. Drive-through RPG, DM's Guild, so much stuff that as an outsider who's looking at this, I'm sure there's a lot of us out there who are just like thinking about dipping our toes and best practices. We'd love to learn from you.
Yeah,
sounds great.
You'll join us again, Dave?
100%, absolutely.
Okay, we again appreciate. Thanks for being our first guest, and I'll have the beautiful, clever overlay working next time for you. Yeah, it looks like the maid's day off.
It's all good. Our backgrounds are filled with enough stuff, but yeah, it's all exciting.
All right, so again, thank you, everybody. Thanks to our guests. Thank you to my co-host, Steve. Thank you for everybody who's watching either live or later on video on demand on Twitch or YouTube. Follow Steve at Conley on Twitter, and follow myself at Dan Leon Taylor on Twitter. And then you can find links to everything else we're working on through there, and all our other social medias. And again, thank you for joining us, and may you all make all of your saving throws.